If you've ever found yourself stuck between wanting the precision of a sniper and the freedom of an assault rifle, then DMRs in Battlefield 6 are exactly where you belong. They won't give you those dramatic one-shot kills like bolt actions, and you're definitely not going full Rambo with full auto fire. But in the hands of a patient and clever player, these rifles absolutely melt opponents from a comfortable distance. You can shut down flankers, win long-range duels, and even take on enemy snipers, as long as you've got the positioning to back it up. Now, let's be honest, DMRs aren't the most popular kids on the battlefield. Most players run straight to ARs or snipers, without giving these underrated rifles a second glance. But if you're the type who likes to hold angles, pick smart fights, and rely on accuracy rather than spray and pray madness, DMRs might just become your new favorite tools. In today's video, we're breaking down every DMR in the game and ranking them to find out which ones are truly worth mastering. I'm quickly moving on to the video. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. The LMR-27 has always had a bit of a reputation in Battlefield 6, and not exactly a flattering one. Every time players bring it up, it is usually followed by a sigh, a groan, or an immediate change of subject. But the funny part is that the weapon is not terrible in the way you might expect. On paper, 4 shots to eliminate a target sounds rough, and needing 3 headshots does not make things any prettier. But when you compare its optimal time to eliminate to something like the SVK or the SVDM, things start to make a little more sense. The damage model is not the real villain here. The real issue begins the moment you look at the magazine. 10 bullets, that is all you get. 10. With a weapon that needs multiple hits per target, that number runs out faster than your patience during a losing streak. And then comes the reload, which feels like an eternity. 2.8 seconds is long enough for 3 enemies to run past you, wave, and maybe even grab a snack. Unless you are landing every shot with absolute precision, your chances of eliminating more than a single opponent per magazine are slim. But before we roast this weapon any further, let us be fair. The LMR-27 does have some redeeming qualities. One of its biggest strengths is its ability to stay accurate while you are on the move. You can strafe, wiggle, reposition, and it still keeps your shots relatively on target. Most weapons in this category punish movement harshly, so having a designated marksman rifle that cooperates while you reposition is, honestly, refreshing. Another bonus is its surprisingly solid hip-fire accuracy. Now, do not get me wrong, this is not something you want to rely on during a close-quarters firefight unless you have a death wish. But it is nice to know that if someone surprises you around a corner, the weapon does not instantly betray you. It gives you at least a fighting chance to react without looking completely unarmed. However, the real standout feature of the LMR-27 is the built-in bipod. You do not need to unlock it. You do not need to grind for it. It is just there, ready to go from the moment you pick up the weapon. And once you deploy that bipod, the entire personality of the weapon shifts. Suddenly, recoil disappears, and the weapon becomes the easiest long-range designated marksman rifle to use by default. It is almost ironic that the weapon everyone jokes about ends up being smoother at long-distance combat than some of the more popular options. That said, even with these strengths, the LMR-27 still struggles to justify itself. When one of its biggest selling points is something every other designated marksman rifle eventually unlocks, it becomes difficult to argue in its favor. Yes, it is stable. Yes, it is easy to control. But when the raw damage output and the magazine size are holding it back this much, the weapon feels like it is constantly fighting an uphill battle. And while the LMR-27 flirts with the idea of being a close-range designated marksman rifle, that potential gets overshadowed instantly by the M277 carbine. That weapon simply does the same job better. Faster fire rate, more reliably aggressive performance, and no awkward magazine limitations. And if you are thinking about using the 20-round magazine attachment to make the LMR-27 more viable at a distance, well, at that point, you could simply pick up the M250 light machine gun and get even better sustained fire. So, in the end, the LMR-27 is one of the strangest weapons in Battlefield 6. It is not useless, and it is not completely hopeless. It has a few very real strengths, especially for players who want a stable, bipod-ready experience for long range. But the drawbacks are so glaring that it becomes hard to recommend unless you specifically want to challenge yourself. It is a weapon that is fun to mess around with, but not one you rely on when your team actually needs you to shine. The M39 Enhanced Marksmanship Rifle is the first designated marksman rifle you get your hands on in Battlefield 6, and honestly, it fits that role perfectly. It is not impressive enough to make you excited, but it is not disappointing enough to make you toss it aside either. It is the definition of a middle ground weapon, the one everything else ends up being compared to. And because of that, it lands in this strange spot where nothing stands out, for better or for worse. One thing worth pointing out is its damage profile. It shares the exact same damage numbers as the SVDM, which sounds great until you look at the fire rate. With a fire rate of 257 rounds per minute, the M39 ends up with an optimal body shot time to eliminate of 0.466 seconds. Now, in theory that is slower than its competitors, but in actual gameplay, you are never going to feel that difference unless you somehow end up dueling someone who is also using a designated marksman rifle, and both of you are counting milliseconds. Because of that, choosing the M39 Enhanced Marksmanship Rifle comes down almost entirely to personal preference. Do you like the way it feels? Do you like the rhythm of the shots? Do you like the way it handles recoil? If yes, then great, because the weapon does nothing badly enough to push you away from it. It is just stable, predictable, and consistent, which is sometimes all a weapon needs to be when you are getting started. One thing the M39 has going for it is the 20-round default magazine. Compared to early setups on the SVDM or the SVK, having those extra bullets gives you a noticeable amount of breathing room. You do not need to panic when you miss a shot or two. You do not need to reload after every duel. That little buffer lets you stay in the fight longer, and that alone makes the weapon more forgiving than some of its counterparts. If you are the type of player who thrives on accuracy and pacing, the M39 Enhanced Marksmanship Rifle feels great. You can secure multiple eliminations if you land your shots consistently, and the weapon rewards measured firing much more than frantic spamming. It is not the most explosive or high-ceiling designated marksman rifle, but as a reliable starter, it gets the job done without making you fight the weapon itself. In the end, the M39 Enhanced Marksmanship Rifle is like a dependable old friend. It is not flashy, it is not exciting, and it will not carry you through every situation. But it will perform exactly how you expect it to. And sometimes that kind of reliability is more valuable than raw power. If you want a designated marksman rifle that keeps things simple and steady, this is the one that sets the standard for the rest. The SVDM sits in a really interesting spot among the designated marksman rifles in Battlefield 6. It fires faster than the SVK, but because it deals less damage, you still need 3 body shots or 2 clean headshots to eliminate an enemy. On paper, that sounds like a drawback, but the faster rate of fire smooths out the experience more than you would expect. In fact, the SVDM ends up feeling surprisingly similar to the M39 Enhanced Marksmanship Rifle in actual gameplay. However, the reason many players lean toward the SVDM over the M39 is simple: the fire rate. At 300 rounds per minute, this weapon reaches that 0.4 second body shot, time to eliminate that weapons like the SVK and even the LMR 27 achieve, but without sacrificing its stability or ease of use. That higher fire rate gives the SVDM a rhythm that feels more responsive, more forgiving, and a bit more flexible in real combat situations. Another thing that helps the SVDM stand out is its handling. Unlike the SVK, which can feel stiff and punishing at close range, the SVDM has surprisingly solid base hipfire accuracy. It is not going to replace a close-range weapon by any means, but if an enemy rushes you around a corner, you are not instantly doomed. You can fight back, and sometimes even win, if you keep calm and land your shots. The catch, of course, is the magazine size. With only 10 rounds by default, you do not get much room for error. Miss a couple of shots, and suddenly you are forced to reload at exactly the wrong moment. That pressure makes the SVDM feel a bit more demanding than some of the other designated marksman rifles, especially when you are using it aggressively. But this is where attachments come into play. Once you unlock the extended magazines, the SVDM transforms completely. With more bullets to work with, you can push forward more confidently, take on multiple targets, and even build the weapon specifically around hipfire accuracy. When tuned this way, the SVDM becomes one of the most surprisingly aggressive designated marksman rifles in the game, capable of handling mid-range and close-quarters encounters better than you would think. In the end, the SVDM is versatile, responsive, and consistently reliable on almost any map except the smallest ones. It rewards players who enjoy a more active, mobile designated marksman rifle playstyle, and its higher fire rate keeps it feeling smooth even during intense fights. If you want a weapon that blends speed, control, and adaptability, the SVDM is absolutely worth keeping in your loadout. The SVK 8.6 is one of those weapons in Battlefield 6 that immediately grabs your attention because of one simple fact: it can eliminate any target with just 2 body shots within 200 meters. No headshots required, no complicated damage math, just 2 clean hits and you are done. That alone makes it far easier to use than most other designated marksman rifles, especially for players who do not want to rely on precision headshot chains in the middle of a chaotic firefight. What makes this even more interesting is the weapon's fire rate. At 150 rounds per minute, it is definitely on the slow side. You feel every trigger pull, and the pace is much more methodical than something like the SVDM. But despite that slower rate, the SVK 8.6 still lands at that same 0.4 second optimal body shot, time to eliminate shared by the SVDM and even the LMR 27. So while it may feel slow, in practice it keeps up surprisingly well. Unfortunately, once you move past the damage profile, the SVK 8.6 starts showing its cracks. The handling is rough and there is no polite way to put it. Aiming down sights takes too long. Reloading feels like the weapon is actively punishing you, and everything about its movement handling makes close-range encounters feel like you are playing with a handicap. If someone catches you up close, the weapon does not give you much of a chance to recover. Hipfire accuracy is another problem area. While some designated marksman rifles can bail you out with decent accuracy when things get messy, the SVK 8.6 does not. Combine its bad hipfire performance with the slow rate of fire, and you have a combination that heavily discourages close engagements. The weapon practically begs you to stay at range and pick your shots carefully. There is also the topic of one-shot potential. The SVK 8.6 cannot eliminate a target in a single hit unless you are using hollow point ammunition. And even then, the one-shot range is around 10 meters, which is practically close-quarters combat, the exact situation where the weapon performs at its absolute worst. Meanwhile, other designated marksman rifles can achieve faster time to eliminate values by landing headshots, something the SVK 8.6 cannot reliably leverage without giving up attachment slots and forcing itself into ranges where it struggles. In the end, the SVK 8.6 is a fascinating weapon with a very clear identity. If you want a rifle that hits hard, rewards deliberate pacing, and keeps mid-range fights simple, it is one of the easiest designated marksman rifles to use. But step outside that ideal range and the weaknesses start to pile up quickly. It is powerful, yes, but only when used exactly the way it wants to be used. And the moment you try to force it into anything else, it quickly reminds you why it is such a specialized weapon. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.